Okay, what we're doing is the real hero of the wedge is my wife, because she did all of these cockamamie things with me throughout the book. And she is now going to be the host, which means she's going to stand right here. She's going to apparate through my background, and she is going to like, so they're going to come up here, and you can just admit them. They're all in now, but, and then, you know, we can go through questions, and this is the hero, Laura Krantz. She's amazing, and she's very pretty, and she's
just do your job. I'm not here.
So I went out and I met Wim in 2011. And one of the things that was so crazy about that experience is it worked. You know, I was sitting in ice water, controlling my body. And I was, you know, there's this moment where I was in the ice water with him, and he said, relax. And I envisioned in that moment, like a wedge, like creating that space between stimulus and response was like literally a wedge. I was pushing the stimulus of the ice water away from my mind and my body's reaction. And you know, I did the Wim Hof stuff for like 10 years. And I, you know, climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. I was in my bathing suit. You probably don't recognize me with a shirt on. But I wanted to see what else was out there. At the end of that, I said, well, what else can I apply this same concept to? And that's where the wedge sort of appears. Like, that's how we get into this concept is that anything that you can push up against, any sort of stress that you can push up against is an opportunity for you to insert yourself into that process. And this means in like a very stressful stimulus, trying to relax. And in a very restful stimulus, trying to find a way to go deeper into those sensations or make them more active in some way. That's basically what the wedge is about. So I'm going to look. Oh, all right. What's the forearm tattoo? That's the first one I saw from David Ratchford. I have a tattoo here, and it says. Do you remember when you said you asked me?
Let's move on. I'm not here.
It says Delhi is far away. And when Laura and I were first dating, we've been dating for a little while, and you know, probably like several weeks. And she said to me, Scott, do you have any tattoos? And I did. It was there the whole time. She just never noticed.
I'd noticed.
And it's
know about DMT breathing.
DMT breathing. Okay. What is DMT breathing? This is like the advanced Wim Hof thing. And in the chapter Breathe Out, I am hanging out in Ely's class. And Ely might be here, I'm not sure, but basically she's a local Denver-based Wim Hof Method instructor. And I was giving a lecture at her class. And when, you know, and then I sat around for her breathing, you know, the 3 hours of Wim Hof breathing that comes afterwards. And I was so excited to be in this group because, you know, when you're in a group doing this Wim Hof method breathing, there's something about it that lets you go deeper. And so while everyone else was doing the normal breathing, which is like, you know, hyperventilation and then exhaling and then holding your breath, I sort of got excited and I wanted to go deeper. And so there's this method that Wim Hof sort of teaches on the sly. I don't think this is an official Wim Hof breathing method, but there's something you do in addition to the normal Wim Hof breathing. If I tell you right now, you're going to go do it, and I don't want you to do it, but it's like 10% different from the normal Wim Hof breathing method. And you sort of like hallucinate and you stop breathing for a long time. So I turned purple and I had this like near-death experience, which is, I believe, safe probably, but I'm not 100% sure it's safe. And then Ely starts touching me. It's like, Scott, you're going down a tunnel of light, wake up. And so the DMT breathing is a you know, it's sort of the advanced and possibly dumb Wim Hof method.
People want to know about ice baths. Does it matter whether you wait until you get into the tub while it's filling or wait until it's full? This is from Frank Edwards Zafino.
Oh, I would say, like, you know, if you're going to jump into the ocean and you're going to like wade in really slowly, that's way more like painful than just jumping right in. So I would say wait till it's full and go in. I don't think it matters. That the point of the Wim Hof method is to get into that stressful situation and then relax once you're there. So it doesn't matter which one you do. But I think it's just less painful for you to just go in full hog right at the start.
And Adrian wants to know if you're still doing regular deliberate cold exposure.
I am. I just took a cold shower this morning. Do you?
I did. I took a cold shower just 5 minutes ago, so I would be clean and shiny for everyone.
Can you hear her? Can someone nod if they can hear her? Good. Yeah, I somehow have roped Laura into all of this cockamamie stuff, but I will say, Gary lost the thing is, people think I'm like super hardcore and I'm taking ice baths every 5 minutes. It's not actually true. You can actually start with a warm shower, which I recommend because it's cleaner. Yeah, I always do a warm shower at first, and then at the end, go and press that do the hardest thing a human has ever done and turn that knob to cold. Ooh, look at that, that's cool. And turn that knob to cold, and that's fine. And then when you're in that stimulus, relax, and then do a straight cold shower every now and then too. That's a good thing. But I think the everyday practice, 3 rounds of Wim Hof breathing, do some push-ups with the breath out, and then do cold showers whenever you feel like it during the day.
You have a question there from Jason. Is there anything you wanted to put in the book that you didn't have space for? Or couldn't? Oh
my God. I feel like I could do the...
There's your dad.
Oh, my dad is joining? Hi, Dad. How you doing, Dad? That's Laura. My father, Wilfred Ignatius Carney Jr. has joined the chat, and I could have very well been called Wilfred Ignatius Carney III. Missed out.
Yeah.
So the question was, what else did I miss? I mean, so much. I mean, there are wedges for anything that you feel, any sort of stressful environment that you can inhabit, anything that triggers your nervous system is an opportunity to practice the wedge. In the book, I did there were 2 or 3 things that I really wanted to put in, but I didn't have time or space to do it. But I may do like one-off books in the future. And one of them was sound. Like I really, iPhone 9 wants to get in. Sound is something that is everywhere. How you communicate with music, how different tones affect you. There's this really crazy, where is it? It's in Joshua Tree, right? There's this sound.
Oh yeah, it's outside of Joshua Tree.
It's like a big dome that you go into that sends sound waves through you and does sort of, I don't even know what it does to you, but it sounds really cool. The Sound Temple or something like that. I think there's something really, really useful in that. So that's one chapter. I did a chapter on nootropics, but I was really like, I tried Qualia, which is like this pill that's supposed to make you smarter. And it turned out that it didn't do anything for me. I felt really weird on it and sort of anxious. And so I decided not to put that in the book. I wanted to just do wedges that worked and not do like a debunking of stuff.
Jeff Johnson wants to know which lab or group you think is...
I think Huberman's lab is quite amazing. Andrew Huberman is a neuroscientist at Stanford, although I don't think he does work specifically on breathing. I think he just talks a lot about it on his Instagram channel. I found in the book, I go to the Feinstein lab at the Laureate Institute in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I found that they were very good. But in terms of like I don't know. I mean, there's so many people doing scientific research on this stuff, and to wade into it, it's so hard to know who really is the most credible and who's just sort of making stuff up. So I can only tell you who I met and thought was credible, and that's going to be Andrew Huberman and Justin Feinstein. There are probably many more. I think The Oxygen Advantage is a great book. The Buteyko Method by Patrick McEwen. Probably many of you people have read this book. I would suggest taking a look there. And yeah, I mean, and Brian McKenzie, of course, but I have a whole chapter about Brian McKenzie in here. He's also very data-driven and amazing.
Someone wants to know what is going on in the brain and body from an experiential standpoint during the wedge.
That's such a good question. So what is going on at an experiential level in the wedge? I think experience is everything here. And I have a lot of science in this book. This book is full. Well, this book is Jesus Christ. Okay. That book is full of science and where I talk about how chemicals change in your brain and neurotransmitters, adrenaline and cortisol. Oh, Sandra. Adrenaline, cortisol, and there's all these biological mechanisms in our body. But personally, when I'm doing these practices, I don't care what the underlying physiology is. I care about my experience in those moments. And so when I'm thinking about the wedge, it's about separating stimulus from response. And that's something you do in your brain. Like you feel something and then you respond to it. And I want to focus, this book is about focusing on sensations, because sensations are giving us information about the environment and how our body is reacting to the environment. So the real object that we're dealing with here is not neurotransmitters. It's not, brown fat or carbohydrates or CO2, even though I talk about all of those things. It's talking, I'm most interested in how our sensations allow us to do things. And in What Doesn't Kill Us, I talk a lot about brown fat. And I talk about how when you relax in the ice water, you stop brown fat sort of activates and it heats up your body. And then research came out after What Doesn't Kill Us came out and said, oh, also when you shiver, brown fat also activates. And so there was a sort of a discussion in this community saying, well, what's important? Is brown fat important or is it not important? And personally, I think it doesn't matter, because you're still in the ice water and you're still heating yourself. Do you really care if it's your mitochondria going crazy, or do you think it's the brown fat that's working, or some other mechanism, if you are doing the feat that and having that resilience? So that's why experience is more important to me than
Wim Hof Method obviously stuck with you. What in all of these experiences from the book has stuck? What are you still doing? Deprivation chamber, trip to Peru going to happen yearly?
Oh yeah, I so wish I could do the trip to Peru right now. Wouldn't that be fun?
It would be.
So I am doing, every morning, Laura and I wake up and we do 3 rounds of Wim Hof breathing together. And usually there's a discussion before we get out of bed and we're like, do we really want to do the Wim Hof method this morning? And one of us says, okay, let's go do it. Okay, let's go to another question. I see so many cool faces that I recognize. It's Jeffrey Kane over there. I think that's Adrian. Yeah, it's so good to see you guys.
Is that Lyndall?
Lyndall?
I think, yeah, it is. It's Beth's brother-in-law.
Hey!
Thought I recognized you. Okay. When working with Brian McKenzie and trying to reduce your heart rate, did he ask you to take normal breaths, or were you able to use a breathing technique like box?
So he just said breathe slowly. What Brian was saying is breathe out more than you're breathing in, which is, I know, not technically possible, but we're really talking about the rate of breath at that. And he after I was like, my heart rate got really high, so he put me on this like assault bike that was moving exceptionally hard, and he was trying to get my heart rate really high. And then afterwards he had me like lie on the floor and just relax into it. And I don't think there was a particular breathing method he was using at that time, but he does recommend the apnea breathing app for his training. So if you are somebody who wants to go deeper into Brian's work, do the breathing that free divers do. Also, you can look at the Oxygen Advantage. And there's something called Apnea Trainer on the iPhone that he uses all the time. Yeah, don't do any of this stuff in water. Thank you so much for the reminder, but never do Wim Hof. I mean, everyone who's here probably has read What Doesn't Kill Us and knows that 9 people have died by doing the Wim Hof method, breathing, and then trying to go diving underwater. That is not recommended in any way. You will die. Don't do it by flying an aircraft or driving a car either.
Tips on making a home ice bath now that it's getting warmer.
That is such a good question, and I have no answer for you. That's always the problem. Like, I know a ton of people who have have their own like cow troughs that they fill with ice, but that's sort of expensive to do. Laird Hamilton has an ice machine that he does, but like doing.
Someone gave her a link in the. In the comments.
There's a link in the comments. Ben Greenfield has a description on how to make your own home ice bath. There's also something called the Morozko Forge. Adrienne here is in our doobly-doo. She is are you a representative? She's a forger, if you will, and that's something that is like has all of the technical gizmos that you need to keep ice water cold all year round and filter it. It is expensive. All right, what's the next question?
The name of the sound thing is called the Integratron.
Oh, the Integratron. All right, well, so it's called the Integratron Sound Bath, and I really want to go there someday.
Someone said it looked like Robert Downey.
Sure looks like
Was it Robert Downey Jr.?
I think it was Robert Downey Jr. at first.
An ideal moment to give space for the wedge when the trolls are coming in.
Very good point, Jason. That was a good time to use the wedge. And as you see, neither of us got flustered.
No, not at all.
We were totally cool like clams that whole time.
What's another good term for the wedge? In England, a wedgie is associated with something quite different.
Yeah, what is a wedgie associated with, Leo, where you're from, would you say? Yeah, I think there's lots of words for the wedge. And this object or whatever it is talked about in pranayama, which is a type of yoga. There are tons of words for it, but whatever it is, it's that place where the body meets the mind. And wedge is the word that came up in my mind when I first said it, and that's what has stuck for me. But yeah, there's probably a better term. If you come up with one, let me know, and I'll retitle the book.
Someone wants to know about using the wedge for people that suffer chronic somatization
from anxiety.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, so keep that question up there, if that's okay. So anxiety is really quite interesting. Essentially what anxiety is the releasing of stress hormones into your body with no correct outlet for it. So if you are, and it's a feeling, right? Anxiety is a feeling in your body. It's that tightness in your chest. It's this feeling of helplessness. And I don't really know exactly what you mean by chronic somatization, but I would say that anything that you can do that puts you in a stressful situation that then you can control. So everything in this book are ways in which to control anxiety. And I think the important thing to remember is what works for me is not necessarily what's going to work for you. It's something you're going to have to experience with, because with the way we encode information in our brains in the first place, forces us to experience the world in different ways. So I would say one thing that would be is probably useful for anxiety would be flotation tanks. The chapter on flotation in this talks about huge improvements in people for anxious people who are able to go into float tanks for a while. Yeah. Adrienne, congratulations and thanks for trying to share some more knowledge. I hope this is useful for you. I appreciate you guys all coming. Oh, one other thing that I want to ask for you guys to do is tomorrow I'm going to do an AMA on Reddit. And if you are a Redditor, I am going to talk about things and do more coherent answers that will have fewer people bombing the chat. And if you could, I also started a subreddit called r/Wedge. Feel free to join to that community. I mean, it has 20 members, so that's like smaller than this Zoom party. But I will be talking about all sorts of wedge ideas, and I'm really interested in other people's wedges, other stimuli that you can put yourself up against where you can change your body's responses. I think that it could be a fun and interesting group. Morozko rules. I like salt baths.
Congratulations on the new book. Adrienne's giving some info on the Morozko Forge. Adrienne says
that there are Morozko Forge models that are as cheap as $3,000, which actually is a deal. Can we put one in our yard, Laura? No. Laura doesn't want me to have one in our yard.
Yard has very little space left in it. You got your sauna. You get one.
We have a beautiful backyard, and
it's tiny. It's tiny.
And yeah, I had to choose between a sauna and an ice bath, and I went sauna on that.
Yeah. Was there anything you were considering researching but didn't feel comfortable or safe doing?
Hanging out with Wim for long periods of time. I mean, climbing up Mount Kilimanjaro with Wim was one of those things where I felt like I was putting my life on the line. Especially, you know, Wim is amazing. He is a prophet. Like he has something that's super special, but he's also a madman, and we have to remember that Wim is a madman. And following him up that mountain was a time when I was not sure why I was doing it. And that's where I also had this realization that it has to come from within me, and I have to be cooperating with the environment, not following someone else's message to get there. So that was probably the most dangerous thing that I did in the Wedge, or sort of in What Doesn't Kill Us. Can't think of another thing that was dangerous. All right.
Yeah, I don't remember. A wedgie is when school bullies pull your pants
up your butt,
which is the same in America.
Yeah, and you could probably practice the wedge in that. You know, that's a stressful moment, stimulus. Yeah. So just don't get riled up when someone's giving you a wedgie.
Were there any things you investigated that you did not make the cut because they weren't effective?
Yes.
This is kind of the pill thing.
Totally. Qualia. There's a nootropic called Qualia that sounded so cool. I hung out in Encinitas with these really impressive people who have the Neurohacker Collective, and they say all the right things, and they have this pill that's supposed to make you smarter. I actually have like 40 of their pills in my closet in the background of the Wedge over here. And they wanted to do, like, you just take a pill and it's the right neurotransmitters and pre-neurotransmitters and vitamins and whatever else that make your brain work better. And for me, when I took it, it just made me feel anxious and like I was hopped up on caffeine. And what I didn't like about that was there was no active component. Like they were just saying, take this thing and it works for you and then you'll be smarter. But I wanted things where where I got to insert myself into that situation. And while I really respect their intentions, it didn't work for me. The other thing that I tried that I didn't make the cut was electrostim, basically putting electric current in your brain to try to change the way you work. And again, it was the same issue. I was working with Tony Florial, and he is amazing. I love this guy. And he has this box that he takes around. I have really cool photos that I actually should probably put on Instagram of him. And what they do is they're trying to put current here and you know, again, change the way you work. And the guy who founded it, he has a very sketchy background, and he claims to be able to like manipulate the stock market and do like make you super smart and all these things. And it just didn't it felt like charlatanism to me. And while if there is something to it, I didn't find it. So I took that out too. And even if it did work, there was no personal component. There was no wedge that we got to work in there.
Mike would like you to tell your favorite story from the Wedge and get people excited about reading the book.
My favorite story for the Wedge is that over 10 things that I did, that my wife was with me the whole time, and she didn't divorce me after making her eat just potatoes for a very long period of time.
What was your favorite thing?
No, but you, not the potatoes.
Oh.
I mean, I think it's great. I think it's great that I have someone who's doing this stuff with me, so you get to see another real person. And what is super fascinating is that what did work for me and my experiences in these moments were sometimes different for her. And the subjective experience is very, very valuable here to realize that you know, you have to work your own journey here. You know, this is not like the 10 steps to be super awesome. This is, here's the way to interface with your body. And I think that probably the coolest experience was the 5-hour sauna in Latvia called the Pirts, which we did together. We flew out to Latvia. And, you know, I got paid with a sauna. Basically, the guy who was running it said, okay, do the sauna, come out, speak to my big group, and then I'm going to give you this like sauna ritual. And we went into the wilderness after I gave the talk. We went into the wilderness and we went to this like really upscale.
It was like a fancy hobbit hole.
Yeah. And they were like fancy hobbits who were the shamans, and they were wearing like green felt hats. And then they stripped us both naked, and then they like beat us with flowers and rubbed honey on us. And then they put us in the very hot room. I think it was like minimum 180 and probably into the 200s. And right at that point, when we were getting to like, you're going to break, you're like, the walls are closing in and I can't deal with it anymore. That sort of meniscus of the wedge, I don't know if that's the right word, but like the very sort of like when you're coming up against your red line, they would do something like put like a sprig of willow in the water and lightly put it on your head. And that would bring you right back below your red line. You had this amazing tolerance because of it. And it was also just it was weird. It was a weird experience.
It was cool. It was really cool. I would do it again. Thumbs up, 2 thumbs up, 5 stars.
And if you ever get a chance to go to Latvia, do a Pirts. Pay whatever they're asking and do a Pirts. Pirts. We write about it in the book, and it is magical. I mean, there's probably similar traditions in Finland, Russia, and places like that. But with a shaman doing it to you it's crazy.
As you were researching these methods, did you start looking for experiences or stresses to test and practice?
Yes.
Or do you have examples? Care to elaborate?
I mean, all of it is like the whole book is me going out and trying to find new things. And like, the way I found the kettlebell passing is literally got a text message as I was walking out of Andrew Huberman's lab, and someone was like, dude, you got to try this thing that puts you into an instantaneous flow state, which I thought sounded a little lame. And then I tried it and I was like, oh my God, this is that thing. So I feel like I'm like the whole wedge was like a process of discovery. It started when I was like on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, and I was like, I need to go find things. And I just sort of went out and found them. I just looked around and I found these things. So the whole book is a process of discovery.
Someone would like you to repeat the name of the subreddit.
The subreddit is r/wedge, WEDGE. Not the wedge.
Just wedge.
Just wedge.
Okay. And there's a lot of tips in here for building your own cold plunge.
Awesome.
Gail wants to know, she works with seniors and wants to know specifically if you've done any stuff with seniors utilizing the wedge.
I have not personally trained any seniors, but a lot of people do the Wim Hof method. Like I climbed up Mount Kilimanjaro with a guy who was 78 years old. I get letters from people all the time who are in their 70s and 80s who are doing various things. So I don't train, like I'm not a trainer, I'm a journalist. So I don't have like that experience, but follow me for a few more years and then I will be old and then we'll be wedging.
Do you plan to do anything dangerous again on the level of climbing Kilimanjaro?
So at the end of the book, I did ayahuasca in Peru, and I felt like that was pretty dangerous. Yeah, I mean, likely, but it's not like I'm going out to seek danger. I'm trying to seek these experiences that innervate my nervous system and embolden my experience. I don't want to die. Like that's not the goal. The danger is not the goal. It's the feeling that's the goal.
Could you speak to your motivation on a more personal level? You seem like a laid back guy, not an underwear model.
She loves that. She's like, Scott, you're not. There's a line in the book where it says, I'm not an underwear model. And she's like, Scott, you're not an underwear model. She's my wife.
What pushed you in particular into transcending self-limiting beliefs and sharing this message?
I don't know, man. Like, I think my whole life. Yeah, I think my whole life is like going after and trying to do. Trying to push, trying to have good stories, trying to have interesting experiences. And, once I started working with Wim, one thing sort of led to another. I don't know if it's something that's specific to me, but I like having adventures. And I think that adventures are more important than money. I think it's more important than fully funding your 401k. I think it's more important than a lot of things. I think that we have to put ourselves into some degree of risk because we're going to die anyway. Like we already know, I write about this in the book a lot, where if life were a song, we know it's going to end in a minor key. Death is coming. And once you've embraced that knowledge, you realize that there's no risk you can take that's not, that's out there that's going to be worse than what we know is going to happen, that we know that the end is coming. So I think that it has allowed me to take risks. Yeah.
A couple of people have asked about the kettlebell stuff and the flow state and want you to talk a little bit more about that.
So I have a kettlebell here, and Laura and I are now going to throw a kettlebell back and forth.
No, we're not.
Okay, we're not
in the house.
We're not going to do that.
I know, I'm no fun. I'm a total buzzkill.
the thing about it is, and you see these photos of me and other dudes throwing kettlebells around, and it looks like, it's made for Instagram. It's like you're burly people throwing bells around. It looks really intense, right? And a little douchey. But it's not. Like, what is actually going on here has nothing to do with the kettlebells. It has to do with the threat that you're creating. And everyone thinks throw kettlebell equals you're going to break your foot, right? Just not if you think that you throwing kettlebell equals breaking your foot. And that danger is real. You can absolutely break your foot by doing this. But what it actually ends up happening is two people are faced off against each other. And they don't want to hurt each other, but they're holding a tool that can hurt each other. And then you're looking right at that threat, that thing, and then you're doing a very easy movement. Like throwing kettlebells is not hard, would you say? But you let it go, and because that threat is real, you both have to have laser-like focus on that object that will hurt you. And when you do that, both of your movements start coordinating almost automatically. And it's an instantaneous flow state. Like it's about trust and empathy. And usually when people first start, I think when we first started throwing, we threw really bad throws.
We were not good.
Because we don't trust each other. And then what throwing the bells is about is building that trust without using words, without having to, there's like these islands in your relationship where that we don't go to, right? We don't want to talk about, and they build up, and they're not necessarily unhealthy, but she doesn't want to throw right now because she's sure we're going to break the floor.
Well, I mean, there's a chance. I don't feel like that's a trust issue so much as we don't want to pay to get the floor redone issue.
See, she doesn't trust me. And the kettlebell is a way to work that out because, I definitely do not want to hurt Laura, right? I don't want to throw the kettlebell and break her foot, and she doesn't want to do that to me. So there's stakes involved, and that keeps you present and in the moment. And that's what I find beautiful about kettlebells.
Adrienne pointed out that she works with seniors, and it's never too late for cold immersion and life hacking. So
there it is.
A piece of information. Ian wants to know about teaching his kid, who is 11 years old, the Wim Hof method. Yes or no?
Yes, I think you absolutely can. I don't see any downsides to it. I mean, what do we know about kids? They love going outside without their coats, and the parents are like, put your coat on. And maybe you can trust your kid a little bit with that. In terms of the breathing, when I was a kid, I did the whole hyperventilation game, right? Where you hyperventilate and then someone like presses on your chest, or you do like a jump or something and you pass out. I did that all the time as a kid. So yeah, I'm not a parent.
Someone mentions about you can achieve a flow state with music as well.
Yeah, you can achieve flow state in anything that is difficult, and then that you find competence in, and that you do automatically. That's what a flow state is. It's like with music, it's hard at first to learn music, and then you just roll into it. And it becomes automatic. And that's really what a flow state is. It's actually removing the wedge where your mind is not involved anymore. It's just, it becomes automatic. And that's a really interesting thing about the wedge is oftentimes I'm talking about creating space between stimulus and response, but it can also be the removal of that.
This is a good question from David, and I've wondered this too. He says, I've done a lot of ice baths and I've gotten very resilient in the cold. I live in the mountains. I never wear a coat, etc. But I've never figured out how to just make the heat turn on like you described and what doesn't kill us.
Right.
How
does Wim do it?
How does Wim do it? How is it different from Tumo? How can you learn to generate and flow heat? Because I can't do that either. I've never figured it out.
Okay. So when you're really cold, do you notice that your back gets tense? Do you notice that there's that you're clenching your jaw when you're cold? Mm-hmm. So that is an autonomic response to squeeze that part of your body which has the brown fat. So when your brown fat comes in, it becomes in like your shoulders back. Whoa. Okay. Brown fat's like right here. And there's some nerves that go up in here as well that innervate that. And when you're tensing that, what I believe is going on is that you're trying to squeeze that area where the brown fat is to activate it. And what Wim's technique is essentially forcing that reaction, forcing that and sort of kickstarting it. And I think the way he describes it is that you have to have BAT already in your system for this to work. And sometimes you need to be in a cold environment to do it. Although I've seen Wim do it.
Sounds like he does that though, because he's taking ice baths. He's in the mountains.
Yeah.
So
I would think that you would have BAT. I don't know, but I would think that you probably would. And what it is you do is you squeeze everything in your body. So you start at your feet, then your calves, and then your butt, and then your chest, your gut, and you're trying to squeeze like you're rolling up pizza dough into that point, which is like right here. Behind your ears. And then whatever muscles you have in your head, you're doing the same thing. You're squeezing down and you're trying to pinch that point, and magically heat comes. And you know what? You're not the only person I've said who's never had that experience. And I probably have it, it probably works for me 50% of the time. I wouldn't say it's like 100% it activates for me, but it does. Like when I was first doing it with Wim obscene, it absolutely worked for me. And I don't know why it's not working for you. How is it different from Tumo? Tumo is an internal thing. So Tumo is like you meditate on symbols, on things in your head that are totally in your brain at first. And then from there, after you get really good at meditating on these objects, your body then responds. But it takes about 20 years to master Tumo. With the Wim Hof method, you jump into ice water, your body reacts immediately, and then you learn to control your sensations. The differences are that Wim Hof method is very fast to learn, and Tumo takes a lot longer. But also Tumo is not only about heating your body up, it's also about a spiritual practice. So it's not like one is better than the other. They're just sort of different.
What was it like self-publishing your book as opposed to going through a traditional publisher?
Who is Jeffrey Kane? Are you still here? Yeah. So that was the thing. This book was originally with Rodale, which is a fine publisher. They did What Doesn't Kill Us. And then Rodale got acquired by a bigger publishing company called Penguin Random House. You might have heard of it. And they fired my team. They gave me a new editor. And the editor really, really had never read any of my books, had not read What Doesn't Kill Us. And she really wanted a self-help book for the 10 awesome techniques to make you awesomer. Yeah, it was a horrible experience. I wrote this book actually 3 times. I wrote it and then I rewrote it and then I rewrote it. And there was always this tension between what she wanted, which was self-help, and what I wanted, which was investigative journalism. And eventually I pulled it from Penguin, and now there's lots of angry lawyers involved with this decision, which is scary. And there's a lot of money on the line and all that horrible stuff. But I needed to get the book out myself. I had to do it. And so me self-publishing is really about control over the message in the book. In theory, I could earn more, but it's, that's sort of a wash. And, but the more I've studied self-publishing, I think this is the way that authors should work in general, because publishers don't actually do anything anymore. They don't edit. When I wrote the book and she was like, you really need to rewrite this. And I was like, well, will you edit for me? She's like, no, you should hire an external editor. And her title was editor, and we didn't like that. I thought that was unfair.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a big fight right now, and it's really traumatic. And but I think the book came out the way I wanted it, and so that's good. Like, this is the book that I wanted to write, and it's not being monkeyed around by a person who doesn't know anything about my career. And I would encourage, if you are a or if you are an author, please talk to me before you go sign a contract with an agent or a publishing house, because I think that the self-publishing market is in a lot of ways better than what publishers are able to offer. And I've written now 4 books, so I have 4 experiences around this.
A question about exploring other areas for the Wedge, like creative pursuits, writing, music, etc.
Yeah.
I feel like it would be useful for performance anxiety, just as someone who used to play concert piano. Like, getting up on stage is really anxious and stressful, and something like this might have been useful.
Yeah, I think for performance like that, it's great, but maybe also for creative pursuits. One thing that I struggle with is procrastination. I don't know if you ever have done that, but sometimes you're like, You don't want to do the thing you want to do. And there's actually a program, like the wedge is often about coming up against a piece of stress, trying to force yourself into doing something. And it's like, it's often putting yourself in environments that force that stress. I have found that deadline pressure can be very useful for people, even in creative pursuits, because you're sitting there just like, oh, something's going to happen someday. And there's a program called self-control, which I think that every writer should have, which A, turns off your internet, and B, gives you a timer. And it says, for the next hour, you will work. And just telling yourself you will work for an hour gives yourself an artificial deadline and sort of like tricks you into forcing yourself into a flow state. And I think that is something that is valuable and has worked for me. And then my goal when I write a book is I try to write 500 words a day. And at the end of 8 months, I have a book. So 500 words is not very much. And you can do that.
Do you consider cognitive behavioral therapy as the wedge?
Yes.
You can, and have you heard of anyone doing any sort of extreme emotional wedge, like training other than fear?
Yes. Cognitive behavioral therapy is absolutely the wedge. They are using the same exact principles. For instance, exposure therapy and I know that there's, if Beth is here, she's a cognitive behavioral therapist. Your Beth.
No. Beth's brother-in-law is here. Beth is not here.
Okay.
I don't know who she is anyway.
So, and the idea with exposure therapy, let's say you're afraid of snakes. You first draw a squiggly line on a piece of paper, and then you make the squiggly line look more like a snake, and then slowly you work someone up into the point where they can hold the snake, and then their snake phobia goes away. I'm butchering this a little bit, but that's the essential one of the parts of cognitive behavioral therapy. I talk about that. I talk about it a lot in the book. I talk also about CO2 exposure in the book, where you can dose yourself with, and CBT therapists do this all the time, where they will dose you with CO2, which induces a panic attack in almost everyone for biological reasons. But you're doing it in a safe setting. So a lot of times people who have intense anxiety fear the panic attack just as much as they fear the stimulus that causes the panic attack. So you take CO2, it causes the panic attack. And the idea is that you're in a safe setting, so you get more comfortable with the panic attack. I'm probably butchering this a little bit, but that's the general idea behind CBT. And one of the things that I did in the wedge, which was really sort of cool and related to this, is that I went to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they dosed me with a really high dose of CO2 to give me a panic attack. But because I've been doing the Wim Hof Method stuff so long, I'm actually immune to CO2, and I actually experienced the CO2, to the panic attack. And I actually experienced it as joy. I actually felt it was really fun. It was like the sensations of like tingling at the end of a breath hold. So they were pretty surprised at that.
Have you tried neurofeedback? Seems expensive. Not sure if it works.
I think there's something to it, and I think maybe that should be a standalone book that I write in the future. Yeah, I think it's cool, but I don't know too much about it.
Can you explain it for people who might not know what it is?
Not very well.
Okay.
I mean, it's giving yourself a stimulus, and then no, I can't describe it well.
Okay.
I can't describe it well.
Next book.
Next book.
One of the 3 pillars of the Wim Hof Method is mindset. How do you differentiate between mindset and the wedge?
Yeah, that's like the squishiest part of the Wim Hof Method. He can't describe it very well. I can't describe it very well. Maybe it's the same thing. Maybe what Wim is saying is the same thing, except that. Yeah, I don't know what Wim says to mindset. What does he say? What does he say on his podcast about that? Because it's something that it's like a line in the Wim Hof Method that's really just like one line that shows up over and over again. And what exactly he means by it might be the wedge. It could be, but he's also sort of talking about it in the cold water. It probably is the wedge. It probably is the wedge.
It might be the mind. When you first went to see him in Poland too, he was like, you have to be open to doing this. So maybe he's talking about that in terms of mindset,
right?
Being like a willingness to try and not already have made up your mind about it.
I think that's a good. I like that.
Good a guess as any.
That's a good a guess as any.
I've read his books. On the mindset question, do you think setting your intention is important?
Yes, I do. I think that it is important to go into something. If you jump into an ice bath and you're thinking it's going to be the worst experience you're ever possibly going to have, you jump in there And then you'll have that mindset of the worst experience. And then you'll have the stimulus that is sort of a negative stimulus. And then it will be the worst experience you ever have. However, if you go into that ice bath thinking this will be joyous, that this will be fun, that this will be energizing, you will give it that tone that will make it better. And, you know, when I was running the tough guy in What Doesn't Kill Us, I was thinking that the sensation of cold on my skin was the sensation of joy. And I bonded those two, that idea of joy with the sensation of cold. And it resulted in me having a blast and being warm in that environment. So mindset is really, really important. And maybe this is what Wim is talking about too.
Matt gave you a definition for neurofeedback.
Okay.
So now you have that.
All right, we have a definition of neurofeedback in the feed, guys. They hook you up to an EEG and put you into a programmed video game. Whoa. The goal is to measure your brain activity when you respond negatively to certain stimulus, go into fight or flight or parasympathetic. And then the game slows down negative feedback. And when your brain does the right things, it speeds up. Wow, that sounds really awesome. All right, we got another chapter of the Wedge, guys.
The Wedge is also epigenetic.
The Wedge is epigenetic. I think what you mean by that is it's expressing genes that you have, genes that you have, right? It's accessing them and turning them on. I would believe so. So basically, when you're in different environments, those environments will trigger genetic changes in your DNA. Well, not changes, but actually activate genes that are in your DNA that may be dormant. It would stand to reason that if you expose yourself to more environments, you're turning on and turning off genes. I don't really talk about this specifically in the Wedge, but it stands to reason that it is epigenetic. Yeah.
Can you describe in detail the breathing you did while climbing Kilimanjaro? It's different. Is it different?
It is different. Okay. It is different. So what you're trying to do there, so the Wim Hof method is hyperventilation and then exhaling and holding your breath on the exhale. That's the Wim Hof method basics. When you're climbing up Kilimanjaro or any mountain, you do not want to do the breath hold. Other than that, it's exactly the same. So you hyperventilate basically the whole way up the mountain. You can start where it gets more difficult. Like if you're at 3,000 feet, you're not going to be feeling it. It doesn't really matter. But if you know you're going to get up to 18,000 feet, start that breathing early. And if you have a pulse oximeter, which is a thing you put on your finger and tells you what your blood oxygen level is, it will tell you what your it will tell you what your O2 is. And you can see it drop as you go higher up. And so, I was at like 16,000 feet on Kili and I was like, oh, is that about 70% oxygen? That's bad. And so you breathe more and then you'll just watch that pulse oximeter jump up into the 90s. And you want to breathe until you're in the 90s. And when you're really low on oxygen, usually your body cannot detect oxygen levels. But when you're really high up in the air, what does happen is your vision dims. It's like you're putting on sunglasses. And if you breathe really hard, the world will literally brighten up in front of you. So you actually do have a way to detect oxygen if you're aware of the dimming and brightening of the world around you.
Those are all the questions. Although Adrian wants to know what we're doing next.
What are we doing next, Laura?
I don't know. Is quarantine going to end ever?
Yeah, I don't know what we're doing next. I have a book.
Probably do a puzzle. I bet we'll do a puzzle.
Yeah. Laura bought a puzzle that is clear. Okay, the pieces are clear.
And all of them are the same.
And are they really?
They're really close.
They're not the same. If they're same, it would be easy. They're similar.
Yeah.
And they're double-sided. So you're going to put them on the table. This is going to take us like a month.
At least.
And so that's what we're doing next. And then I also have a book that I'm doing about the 1970 Bola cyclone in Bangladesh, which you were like, what? It has nothing to do with the Wedge or Wim Hof or anything. It's a historical look at the most deadly cyclone in human history, which killed 500,000 people in 1970. And from there, and at that point, Bangladesh was Pakistan. And this storm caused the revolution that where Bangladesh broke off from Pakistan. So I'm looking at, oh, and not only that, it almost sparked a nuclear war between the USSR and the United States. So I'm writing this book about climate change and conflict as a sort of an allegory for what we might be facing in the future. So that's the next book. That's 2021. Oh, and by the way, if you're in this chat, which you said you might be, I'm working on it. I have stuff I need to do, and I'm working on the edits, but after this call, promise.
Your mom says, fun to see you too.
Yeah, hi, Mom.
Hi, Linda.
I see you.
Hi, Laura.
That's my mom. She's waving right now. And that's my sister. That's Laura. And that's Jeff Farrenwald, who gets a shout out in the end of my book. You see Jeff, he's got in the blue at the top. And I just wanted to point this out to people because I think Jeff will get a kick out of this. At the end of the book,
oh, it's not going to work.
No, it will work.
Jason says LOL gets to work.
Uh-oh, Jason's here. He's trolling me. If it says Jeff Farrenwald right at the end of that, I dedicated the end of the book to him. And Jason, my other friend who I'm working on the Bola Cyclone book with, is here in the chat. And I love you, Jason. You're the best. and I really am going to work on the manuscript, I swear.
You don't have any more questions.
Okay, I think that's it, guys. I think that we've zoomed. If anyone wants to now display pornography in the feed, I'll open it up to trolls. You're welcome to like a celebrity or something can go in there. It'd be
Maybe
great.
Some racist comments.
Oh yeah,
would be nice too.
Everyone loves a good racist comment. Yeah, and again, the Wedge is doing well. If you have read it, please review it. That helps. That helps the Amazon to deliver the book to people, and it's hugely useful in the future. Join our Wedge and let's make that cool. Just talk about things that where you're coming up against stress and how you control yourself in it. And I'd love to see a community show up there. And I'm going to do an AMA tomorrow in the morning, and give me upvotes. Yeah, social media credit. I need it. I need your credit.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everyone. It's been amazing.
Bye.